All right, next up we're going to discuss the integumentary system. For this section, the learning outcomes are to explain the function of human skin, describe the structure of the epidermis and dermis, and identify the function of the accessory organs that are associated with the skin. So, while we may not think of it this way, the skin is actually a single complex organ system that includes not just the organ skin, but all of its derivatives, like hair, nails, glands. Together, these are going to perform a variety of functions like protection, because it forms a barrier between the contents of the body it forms a barrier between the contents of the body and foreign bacterial UV radiation, or protects us from physical or chemical assault. It's also useful for temperature regulation through sweating or the formation of goosebumps. It's also responsible for the production of vitamin C. We have modified cholesterol molecules in the skin's outermost layer that can be converted to the molecule vitamin D by exposure to UV radiation. The vitamin D can then travel through the bloodstream to the liver and the kidneys, where it is then involved in the absorption of calcium and phosphorus from the food we eat. The final function that we're going to mention of this organ system is that it contains the source for a variety of our senses, like touch, pressure, and pain receptors. These are all going to be found on the surface of the skin. So like I said, the integumentary system is going to contain our skin, but it's going to contain 4 specific tissue types. So skin has 2 main regions, the epidermis and the dermis, and then under the skin is going to be the subcutaneous layer, also known as the hypodermis. So here's just a diagram that gives us sort of an overview of the anatomy of the skin. We're going to be breaking down this diagram quite a bit in the remainder of this section, but this is a really awesome overview slide. So I do want to encourage you to spend a little bit of time going through all of the different structures and accessory organs that are found in this layer of skin. But to start off with, we're going to talk about the epidermis. The epidermis is going to be the outermost layer, epi meaning on or over. So like I said, this is the outermost layer. This is the part that you can touch. It's ultimately going to be made up of dead cells that are constantly being replaced by the layers below it. This is the layer, in this layer, that is constantly growing and dying and sloughing off and being replaced. We're going to expect to see a lot of mitosis occurring in this area. So, and again, we haven't really discussed mitosis yet, but later in the semester, we're going to be talking about the process of replacing cells through mitosis. So the epidermis consists of several layers of epithelial cells. The outer surface, like I said, is made up of dead skin cells, whereas the deepest layer is going to be composed of rapidly dividing cells. Now, there aren't any blood vessels found in this outermost layers. Cells are going to receive their nourishment from the dermis, the layer just below, but they are going to die off as they move towards the surface. This is going to have some protective properties. Most of the protective properties come from keratin, which is found in this layer. There are a couple of cells that are found in the epidermis, things like keratinocytes. These are found in the upper layer of the epidermis. They're dead. They're going to be filled with keratin. This is going to be responsible for forming our waterproof barrier. There are also Langerhans cells found in the epidermis. These are going to be a type of white blood cell that are going to help protect us against infection and disease. Melanocytes are also going to be found in the epidermis. These produce melanin. This is ultimately responsible for skin color and helps protect us from UV light. People have the same number of melanocytes, but differ in the amount of melanin that is going to be produced. This is what contributes to differences in skin color. There are other contributors to skin color, things like keratin and hemoglobin. Will help contribute to the amount of redness versus yellow undertones. So the epidermal cells here are going to be where we produce vitamin D when exposed to UV rays. Like I said, vitamin D is important in the regulation of calcium and phosphorus levels in our bloodstream. So stem cells that produce the new epidermal cells are going to be found in the deepest layers. if we have an injury that destroys those stem cells, that skin is going to need to be replaced. We can do that a couple of different ways. We can either use an autograft, so take a skin graft from a differing area of the body, or an autograft uses skin from a different area of the body, or an allograft actually uses skin donated from another individual. We are now also developing the ability to grow skin in the lab. Skin cancer is caused by overexposure to UV rays from the sun. There are a couple of different types. Here we have a basal cell carcinoma. This is where we have cancer of the epidermal stem cells. This is the most common type of skin cancer, and it's usually pretty easily treatable just by simply removing the cancerous cells. Melanoma is going to be found a little bit deeper. This is going to be cancer of the melanocytes, and it's extremely serious and much more difficult to treat. The next layer, moving down from the epidermis down to the dermal layer. So the next layer down from the epidermis is the dermis. This is going to be much thicker than the epidermis. This is going to be composed primarily of blood cells, hair follicles, oil glands, sweat glands, sensory structures, and nerve endings. This is also sometimes called the tattoo layer. This is the layer that does not shed easily, so ink will remain if it's injected down here. This is why receiving a tattoo can be so painful. It's because we are tattooing the layer that has those blood vessels and nerve endings. Collagen and elastic fibers are also going to be found in the lower layer. This is going to allow the skin to stretch and return to its original shape. The hypodermis is also called the subcutaneous layer, and that's going to be found below the dermis. This is going to be responsible for anchoring the skin to the tissues of the other organ systems that lie beneath. Its function is going to be primarily for protection, temperature regulation, fat storage, but it's not really considered part of the skin because it is found below, and it's primarily just an anchoring base between the skin and the organs beneath. All right, so you should be able to briefly list the functions of skin and compare the structures and function of the epidermis and the dermis.